We are students of the art of play,
And we do this show called The Art of Play.
a show for the players who ask why.
I'm Vi.
And I'm Gaia.
Hey Gaia, what are we talking about today and who is this lovely person sitting beside me?
So today we're going to be doing the Dark Souls of podcast episodes.
Ooh.
And we're going to be talking about game difficulty. Weirdly enough, we have gone through, I want to say, 26 episodes of the show. This is episode number 27 since we first began a year and a half ago.
Hey Gaia, if you had pitched this a year and a half ago and been like, we're going to do more than 25 episodes, I would have been like, you're out of your mind.
Back then, we had the goal of doing 8 episodes. We want to do 8 or more episodes.
Yeah.
And now here we are on episode number 27
Crazy.
or something.
It's too many. Actually, it's not. We'll keep going.
I can't believe that in all this time of doing game design, we've talked about like tutorials and depth versus complexity. We've talked about hardware design, game psychology, game research. We've not talked about difficulty.
Yeah. How hard is the game? When do I hand
Should
the
game be
controller
hard?
to my dad?
How hard is fair? What does good hard look like? I don't like the sound of that.
What does good hard look like?
What is a good level of difficulty for in-game
Yeah.
design?
Yeah.
And this is a question we haven't touched on. So I thought it would be a good idea for today. And we thought it'd be good to bring in one of our friends who has done playing a lot of games, thought about game design in the past, and has opinions on games, and is also a close friend of mine who's going to be working on projects with me in the future. So
Yeah.
I'm going to toss it over to you. Who are you?
Hello, I am Taya, and I've been a big fan of the show for a little while now. Congratulations on 20 plus episodes. That is epic.
It's pretty good.
I am a self-prescribed difficulty gamer, glutton for punishment here, so I'm really
The
excited.
Dark Souls player, basically.
Basically,
fair enough.
The Dark
Yeah.
Souls of games players.
You could argue. My question is not why, it is why. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here to chat about how difficult difficulty is today.
Yeah. How good hard is something?
I'm not living that down.
Yes, you are.
That's gonna be
You'll be
another one of the
okay.
shirts, isn't it?
Yes.
So
Druid Enjoyer. How good is good hard?
the show is full of these. So the idea for today's episode is we want to really answer 3 overarching questions throughout this discussion. First, what types of difficulty are there? Which is also when we're going to get our good friend Taya to kind of talk about some examples of hard games and if they're good, if they're bad, etc. We're then going to be talking about how do we make games hard in terms of their mechanics. So what mechanics make games hard in a way that is friendly to the player?
In a way that is like a difficulty level and not a frustrating inaccessibility sort of way.
Yeah. And it's weird to think of this on how do you make difficulty that's friendly to the player? Because even when you're making a game hard, you're still making a game for a player.
You could say that you're still making a good game. You're just
Yeah.
making a good hard game.
You can imagine this like D&D where we say you're not playing against your players, you're playing with your players. So you still have to make a fun experience. And the same holds true here. How do we make games hard in a way that's fun and fair?
It's actually a really, really good point because you can make a combat encounter too hard and then it's just too long and boring, or you can make it just the sweet spot of difficult where it's like, okay, I feel the pressure of this and I can enjoy it and think it through and enjoy doing it without being like, this sucks. I want to go home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the last item, we're going to be talking about how do we make games hard thematically. So this is going to be more like the overarching concepts rather than specific mechanics that are hard. This is like the real game design piece of it. You're a designer in a room storyboarding a game, thinking up how it's played rather than you're designing a specific game mechanic. And yeah, so I kind of want to just kind of jump in there and invite Taya to talk a little bit. And I want to ask you, Taya, what are some good hard games?
I feel like the first piece with good hard games is the intentionality of the game. It's thinking about the audience that you're creating the good hard game for, right? Good hard games are made specifically, and the fact that I have to keep repeating that term.
I'm
just
so
say-
sorry that I made this joke at the very front. It's going to be with us the whole episode.
Can we,
Why
like-
don't we just say good? No, because the problem is that it's right.
Just to make difficulty. We can just say to make
Yeah.
difficulty.
Make quality difficulty, or you could argue guard games. They're good hard games. Right? Let's just merge the
Guard
words.
games.
Guard
I like
ga-
guard
guard
games.
games is good.
That works.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So guard games. Ooh, sanity damage. Guard games ideally are not creating sanity damage, though. I think it's the intentionality of like creating a game for the audience of people who want that challenge, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head too there with the point about like the ceiling. Like you want to give something that a player can push themselves
like
with.
reasonably achieve. I'm talking about like getting into a flow state. Like it is exactly challenging enough for your skill set, right? Like it's just hard enough that you feel like you're like getting into it and understanding it, and and beating it, right? Might take a couple of tries or a little bit of time, but you're not like, doesn't feel like the game is just hitting you for making mistakes.
And I think the point too is important, that there's not like a one specific skill set. There are going to be different skill sets for every person. Every player is different. But how do the games intentionally add difficulty into the game without it being like in your face? Like, here's the easy, medium, hard difficulty slider that maybe we don't all love so much.
Yeah.
I can imagine, like, we talk about, you've been mentioning how difficulty is intentional, how it's good intentionality makes good difficulty. So when we're talking about what kinds of difficulty are there, kind of the first question for today's episode, I think we can all understand that unintentional difficulty is not good difficulty.
Yeah, I think by definition, like, if it's unintentionally hard, you didn't mean to make it that hard, and therefore the difficulty is like kind of artificial and shouldn't exist. You didn't go, how do I make this challenging to the player? You just went, here's a combat, and then, oh, it's hard.
Yeah.
But as a question, Taya, is there such thing as bad intentional difficulty? Could we intentionally be making games hard, but that still be a bad thing?
I think yes, depending on what the goal of the game is, right? The first game that pops into my head is that little like getting over it game with the guy sitting in a pot and he has like a hammer or something and he just keeps swinging it and he has to climb up a mountain.
You have to climb up the mountain using a single hammer.
Yeah.
Sounds terrible. See, I was thinking more like make something hard so it's inaccessible to the player within a game. Like if you're doing something open world and it's like, that's too hard because you're not supposed to be involved in this storyline yet.
Yeah, that I have experienced that exact thing, which is the reason I stopped playing Skyrim, because I did the quest where you turn into a werewolf, I killed a chicken, and I got stuck in a cave. So, not great.
Oh,
That was it.
That's partially the reason why I stopped playing Breath of the Wild for a while.
Oh, fair enough.
Because I got stuck on a mountain with enemies that were way too hard.
Yeah.
And didn't realize it until it was too late.
That's actually part of the reason I stopped playing The Witcher, is I was just like, I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this yet. And then I found a way to make it work. And now I'm in a place in the game where it's like I have to go back and like find the little pockets I missed so I can move on at the like right level.
Farm back through the game, basically.
But I didn't have that with Breath of the Wild, and I learned weirdly it was because you've played this game, yes?
Yeah.
I don't know what Divine Beast people go for first. What did you go for first? Do you remember?
I played the game too long ago to remember that.
No?
I've
Okay.
not reached a Divine Beast.
Oh, Gaia. Okay. Well,
Ouch.
I've owned this game since we first started the show.
This is like the one game I keep talking about. You have to play it.
I had started playing it, and
believe
then I
it.
got stuck on an ice mountain and got in a death loop because every time I reload, I die.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of lucked out with that game because I went to every Divine Beast gives you a buff after you defeat it, right? My first buff was basically just like an extra life. Was just like forgiveness, right? Which was so good. It's Mifa's Grace, right? That's what it's called. But it was just like, oh, okay, now I don't have to restart everything every time I do something stupid. It's like I have one instant refresh, and I can keep going.
So the forgiveness item.
Yeah, and it was just because I was like, that mountain looks cool. I'm gonna go that way, even though maybe it wasn't. I know my brother went for like the whole like Gerudo thing first, which is fair.
Yeah. But also talking about intentional difficulty that's bad. There are more types that I want to get into that I think Taya and we both have notes on this one in our documents. And that's that you can design a game to be hard for selfish or personal gain reasons. I'd like to think of the example of have you ever seen those mobile games that have those timers that are like, you can wait 20 minutes for this action to happen or pay money now and it happens immediately?
I know of them. I've tried some of them and delete them because I don't like waiting.
Yeah. So this is an example of both malicious difficulty for time and for money. Particularly money in this case, where the idea being that you have games with microtransactions specifically because you want people to get angry at the difficulty or the things that you're putting in their way so that they give you money to get through the difficulty, and then they run into the next piece of difficulty and give you more money.
You know what's the easiest option that happens? delete the game.
But I would add, there are times where this makes sense, because this is the philosophy of arcades.
No.
If a game in an arcade is hard and you lose a life and it costs a quarter to restart, you put in that quarter, restart, and try again. This is actually the origin, by the way, of difficult games. When people talk a lot about games in the past, like the original Mario, and ask, why was it so hard? Because the original games were in arcades, and they wanted your money.
Yeah. I think I disagree with that because I don't like the way it's structured. I would rather just buy the thing and then enjoy it, which I understand is a totally different world to live in.
Yeah. But that's a completely different consideration overall.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Old arcades literally did make games hard. And arcades to this day make games hard at certain points so that you'll spend more money on the game.
Yeah. There's built-in points where you die a lot so that you're like, oh, but I just got through that level.
But you can also imagine games that are hard because they want your time. If a game has ads and you looking at the ads gets them money or gets them something that's valuable, it's worth it to make the game take longer so you see more ads, or make you watch an ad to speed things up.
I think a prime example of this was a little game called Flappy Bird, and just the infinite crying because it was built, the way it responded to your tapping was built to make the game impossible to play, right? But like for their ad and their use of your time, like that ate up everyone's time because it was frustrating because it was built maybe not so well.
Yeah, I was just remembering that I didn't remember that this existed, but when Flappy Bird died, like not the bird, the app,
the game,
when it was no longer made, my friends and I went through this whole thing of like, what's the best like emulator or like best copy of Flappy Bird that works in the same kind of way, because we were all so tuned in to how that, I just totally forgot that existed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone had that moment.
Yeah.
But as we kind of alluded to, there are other examples of intentional difficulty. And this is really what I want this episode to kind of be around, is when games are hard because you want them to be, and when you're not trying to steal things from your players, like their money and time.
Yeah.
When a game is hard because you want it to be hard.
Dark Souls.
Dark Souls.
The episode.
Dark Souls. The episode. Yeah.
Now, we did talk about this already, Vi, that when it came to the past, games were hard because arcade games had to be hard for your money. But also a lot of the developers who started making games on like the NES or the SNES were arcade developers originally.
Yeah, fair enough.
And they had all these lessons of a game has to be hard. It has to take this much time. This level should require this much practice.
Yeah.
So when they made games with this, like the original Mario and like Contra, for example, or the original Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I guess there weren't like super easy levels. They were like, this is going to be hard and you're going to suck at it for a while.
Yeah. And also you can imagine, like, think about it like this. You have like a megabyte maximum for your entire game.
Yeah.
And you want your game to be beatable, or to last more than a couple hours, because games back then were $80 to $100 in today's currency.
I mean, they're still $80 to $100.
Well, game prices dropped for a while, right? They're going back up now, but
Yeah.
keep in mind, the Xbox 360 was the cheapest games were in human history, right? The prices was going down for a very long time. But you can imagine you wouldn't want to buy a game for $80 to $100 and then have it last 2 hours.
Yeah.
So it has to take you a while. It has to take time.
Yeah, it has to feel worth it.
Especially so that they can make another game, so that you go buy another game.
And it makes sense for the context too, right? Like the developers at the time were trying to make games that fit into this tiny amount of space and artificially extend them, because you feel like you're getting your money's worth out of the game at that point. So like, no shade to retro games, they're wicked.
No,
and
they're
also
cool,
like
yeah.
limited
I
resources.
still play old ones like Earthbound. I've recently started picking up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how different those games are for the same, like, okay, I'm going to play like the original Super Mario, right? Versus Baldur's Gate for the same money. I know what I'm going to choose.
But it's
right?
also like time has passed, and maybe that is not the standard that we want in terms of difficulty for games at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think also we game for different reasons now.
We do.
Like the arcade, like I can understand like spending a bunch of time in playing the same game, you know, no different than what we do at home. But I think once you bring games into the home, you're looking for something fundamentally a little bit more engaging.
And it depends on the audience again, right?
Yeah.
It's like that, again, like, are you going for the arcade or the Flappy Bird experience, or do you want something a little bit more immersive and challenging for different reasons?
The Flappy Bird experience.
Yeah. So on this, knowing that modern games, we still want difficulty, but we don't want that. I'm going to kind of turn this back over to Taya. Taya, why would someone like you want a game to be difficult?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different reasons why you want a game to be difficult. My personal biggest reason, and probably a reason I think a lot of folks share, is just the feeling of success.
Yeah.
It is the Dark Souls episode, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
personally, and I think a lot of folks share this opinion, that the best thing about Dark Souls is when you've had to fight a boss 50 times and then you finally beat the boss.
Yeah.
Because the thing I really like about Dark Souls 2 is that a lot of the bosses and a lot of the enemies that you fight have patterns. So you can, after you've died so many times, you learn how to follow those patterns.
Yeah.
So you actually feel a sense of progression and growth while you play the game. So you feel like you're getting better, and then you
described
win.
to me as a like a rhythm game, but it's combat.
It 100% is. There's actually, I can't remember if it's, I think it's Dark Souls 1 that has a really cool boss called the Dancer, and it messes everybody up because all of the bosses in Dark Souls are based on 4/4 time.
Yeah.
The Dancer's based on 3 time. It's like a waltz, so it threw everybody off in fighting that boss,
Yeah,
which
cool.
again was like intentional difficulty, but it
Yeah.
has a piece that you can learn because once you pick up on that time signature, you're
Yeah.
like, okay,
Okay,
readjust
yeah.
the pattern,
Does
learn
it
the pattern.
match the music? Like if you went into Dark Souls and you knew that the music was
Yeah.
in 4/4 time, you could be like, okay, this boss will be in 4/4 time.
Yeah, you can count the time patterns and you can match different attacks, and they telegraph really well too. Like they usually do a 1-2 big wind up.
Yeah.
And so you could dance with the bosses in Dark Souls basically. It's just
I'm gonna have to try Dark Souls again when I have a little bit more time and like a little bit. Yeah, because I think that was the thing that was really frustrating for me encountering Dark Souls was I was like, okay, this aesthetic is a challenging one for me. I like color, don't really like sort of dark,
yeah, it is dreary.
grim dark. Yeah, and that's not a huge thing for me. So playing that game is a little bit just frustrating aesthetically for me. Not
Yeah.
a thing I want to like relax with. I will
like
have
Sekiro then. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Same
interesting.
company.
Yeah. Same with Elden Ring. Like I know it's a lot more intimidating because Elden Ring is this huge
Yeah,
open
open
world,
world,
but they have
yeah.
some really pretty glittery, shiny, happy areas
Yeah.
combined with the
It
dreary
just
darkness.
There is some of the
has to be
grimdark,
pretty.
But
yeah.
Sekiro has the old like cherry blossom aesthetic.
Oh, fun. Okay,
But-
cool.
Just to kind of ask both of you as well, wanting that sense of reward is a big reason why people would want hard games. But that's the same reason why people speed run or that they do
Yeah.
achievements or other challenges. So there has to be more to it to make people want difficulty rather than challenges. Why do they want the game hard? So I would kind of open this up to both of you. Is there another reason you can think of that someone would want to play a hard game?
That feels more to me like a practice mastery thing, right?
speedrunning.
Well, like speedrunning too, but like something that is difficult and then overcoming it, like you said about Dark Souls, has to be the reason that people want more of a difficult thing and less of a more repetitive thing.
And I think too, it depends on what grabs your attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
If different games serve different purposes. Like I'm also a huge Animal Crossing fan, and when you play a game
Yeah.
like that, you want to chill and you want to relax, or you just
Yeah.
want to immerse yourself in the story, and that's like a happy, cozy game, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you play a game like Dark Souls, I assume most people are not looking for that experience. No judgment.
Yeah.
If Dark Souls is your coziness, good for you.
Go for you, yeah.
Right? But for me, when I go into that game, like you almost want a sense of challenge. It's something where you're like, I
Yeah.
want to be punished a little bit here.
Yeah,
but
I want to kind of chew on something a little
yeah,
bit.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like you want to have to push yourself.
yeah,
right?
and I think like Animal Crossing like does have an aesthetic that is like kind of fun, but I get bored instantly.
Yeah,
like, it
and
doesn't.
that's the
doesn't
attention
have-
thing,
Yeah,
right?
it doesn't have enough for me there to chew on. Like I think it's intention.
Yeah, I think it is. It's the attention grabbing and just overcoming challenges. I think that's one of the major reasons, and I also think that you can use difficulty as a really interesting narrative piece as well. And I think
Yeah.
Celeste is a really great example of that. And I know Gaia has been playing that a little bit recently.
I was playing it on stream last night with Taya. But I think also there's one big reason I want to get into about why people like difficulty. And I think this is one that isn't as obvious. So, of course, if you want a game to be hard, you can insert a difficult challenge quite reasonably. You can add achievements, you can speed run it. A game doesn't need to be hard for it to have a challenging aspect. So, of course, having a game that itself is built around that challenging aspect is nice, but ultimately not required. People were doing it for a long time during the era of easy games. But there's one other reason I can imagine. It is pretty easy to make an easy game. To make a game that people don't have to struggle too much. You can focus on narrative. There's not much mechanical work in making an easy game. But making a bad hard game is also very easy because
Yeah.
there's no balance. It's bad.
Lazy.
Making
Yeah.
a good game that is also quite difficult is very hard and requires you to think very deeply.
Yeah. And I think you also have to be pretty competent as a gamer to understand what makes a good game hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and the argument I make for this is that people don't necessarily want difficulty. They don't want to be beaten up. They don't want their teeth kicked in the game, right?
Yeah.
Like even with Dark Souls, the goal is not to have your teeth kicked
Yeah.
in.
The goal isn't to die instantly or else I would have won. Like,
Yeah.
The thing is that people want their game to be deep. They want depth. They want consideration. They want a developer who has spent time I don't want to say developing, but that has spent time considering every mechanic, how things play together, and how they can use these mechanics to make a game hard but fun. That's what people are looking for. And it's hard to make a game that's difficult and fun to play without also succeeding at these things. So why do we want a difficult game? Because we want a game that people have thought about beyond let's throw enemies in their way and have them shoot through them for fun. People want depth in their games.
And I think it's also important when combat serves narrative. I don't think every, narrative doesn't have to be super important for a lot of games, but when combat is done really well, it can also serve narrative purposes.
And I think it plays a really important piece in how you experience the game, too. Combat is awesome, especially in terms of open worlds, too. You can insert bosses that are incredibly challenging to kind of give you a general sense that you're not supposed to go in that area.
Yeah.
Or it does something where it pushes you and it shows you your progression in the game, right? Another thing I love about Elden Ring is when you start the game and you open up into the open world kind of after you've been in the catacombs area, they throw a tree sentinel in your face, which is this big golden guy on a horse, right? And it's like one of the first big things you look at. And you see this and you're like, that looks important. I want to go fight that. And you usually get immediately schmucked.
Yeah.
But it teaches you that this game is, one, going to be really challenging. And two, to come back to that area when you get a little bit stronger and you can defeat it. But you also know maybe I should avoid parts of this area in the open world because it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, I'll come back to Breath of the Wild, and the reason I talk about the game a lot is because I really like it, but also because I know it's really accessible. Lots of people have played it, and it's really popular, but this is like the Hyrule Castle, right? You don't want people to explore it before they're ready for it, so it's really dangerous, right? It's really difficult.
Yeah,
So,
but again, that's that intentional design, right? They're thinking about how that difficulty impacts their player, and it's set within certain parameters. It's not just like random difficulty where everything is shooting you at the same time.
It's very much like, don't come here yet. Go learn about the other stuff we put into the game.
It's not like open world bullet hell, basically, right? Because that may not be the best experience.
Open world bullet hell is the next Dark Souls game.
That sounds horrible. But also, I think during our recording with Matthew McLean, I talked about having watched a video on Fallout New Vegas, or at least I mentioned it prior to our recording at least, and that I learned from that video that in the original Fallout, the final area of the game is next door to the starting area just to the west. And you can go there immediately and you will get insta-killed. And that game is hard, don't get me wrong. That game has a lot of really good examples of good, well thought out difficulty, but part of it really is that the ending area is right there and it's full of a bunch of death claws, which are some of the hardest enemies in the Fallout universe. It's one of those things where when you at the end of the game, killing one of them is a reward, and seeing two of them is when you run away. And the same thing happens in New Vegas. Your goal in New Vegas is to go to New Vegas, and there's two pathways. The short way, full of death claws that will kill you, but you can fight them, or the long way, which has all the quests and the fun interactions, and where they're using this difficulty as a bit of a narrative. You can still go the hard way. Good luck.
Or I'm also thinking about using using difficult combat to serve narrative in like, okay, you've been rewarded along this whole thing, but you and the character you're playing as, you're now going to have to encounter a hard thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I think this leads to kind of the second question. This thing I'll pose right back to both of you, especially I think Taya, you have notes, but I think Vi as well.
Taya, we're just on a quiz show where Gaia sits over there and goes, hey, I have some questions, answer them.
Hey,
and we just go over here and we have our own little conversation.
I'm prepped with the ding 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 open world bullet hell, so let's go.
Ding 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 bullet hell. You also got a cheat sheet over here.
She has her own note sheet that she made with me.
Yeah,
so,
you sat down with the prof, got the answers to the test, and you're now just writing it in front of me. Everybody else struggling. You're like, I have them on
I'll
my
ask
arm.
Taya then.
Okay.
Taya.
Taya cheating on the test. Let's go.
Let's go.
For the second major question of today's episode, how do we make games difficult mechanically? What can we do to design a hard game?
difficult mechanically, again, I think within parameters, right? One of the best things I think about difficulty is when it is progressive. So I'll go back to Celeste as a really great example of progressive difficulty, because Celeste starts out and you basically have to just like jump and dash across a cavern with spikes, right? And as you go further and further into the game, you get little gems that you can go across and get more jumps and dashes or moving platforms. But it does it incrementally, so you're not starting out with like, I have to do 20 different challenging things at once, right?
Yeah.
It's like piece by piece by piece. So you're learning in these little bits, which are a little bit challenging. But when you get further in, it's like, looking at this level, if I had never played the game before, this is insane, but it feels easy to you as a player because you've been moving through it piece by piece, right?
This feels a lot like when you're in like middle school and a teacher will be like, hey, do you guys want to see high school calculus? And we'll write something on the board and you're like, I don't even know what half those symbols are. But then when you're past that step, you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that's just easy.
Especially if you have the answers to the test like me on the podcast today,
Yeah,
right?
you.
But,
Are
like,
you saying that a school is like a video game implementing difficulty?
Yeah.
we are students of the art of play.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
come on. Like, come on. Guy, that's the whole
Yeah.
point of this show. What do
You know what?
You were going to roast me for it, and Taya came in so clutch with our own
Yeah, that's her
tagline.
thing. She always comes in clutch when I say anything.
I
That's
wasn't
that's her
lying
role.
when I said I
No.
was a fan of the show. I have listened to it
Have
before,
listened
and
to
I
it.
have the proof in my
Can't
notes.
believe
Yeah.
she knows the show better than I do, and I'm the one who writes the show. Okay, so you're definitely right. Incrementalism in game design.
And, hang on, and thinks you're right. Gave you the correct
Wow,
answers.
yeah. Cheating on the test is going really well for me.
Okay, I have nothing about incrementalism in my notes. That's her own answer. She wrote that down herself. But yeah, no, incrementalism is a very good way of implementing difficulty and ensuring that your players don't get frustrated. And that's especially one of the key elements of designing a hard game. Don't let your players rage quit.
Yeah.
If there's something that's going to make your player rage quit, don't make that.
Yeah.
Don't put that there. This is
you-
when playtesting is extremely
Yeah,
important.
if you
by the
ever
way.
give it to a playtester and they come back and they go, I got this far and I didn't want to play anymore, fix it.
And I can think of good and bad examples of this. I know Dark Souls usually telegraphs the upcoming major enemies before you have to fight them. Before one of the major dragon fights, you do see a dragon, and you look at that, and having some experience with the game, you're like, oh no, I have to fight that dragon.
Yeah.
But it feels
Oh, I
so
have to
cool
fight
when
that
you
dragon.
beat a dragon.
Hey, Tay, are you playing Baldur's
I have
Gate?
just
You've
started,
just started.
it, so I'm only
Okay.
a little ways in. I've not killed any dragons yet.
Okay. Just because there is one point, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying this, there's one point where you, like, see evidence of a dragon, and I saw evidence, and I
Okay.
went, I know that's not a place I want to be,
Yeah.
and boogied the opposite way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boogied.
But I would
Oh,
also...
yeah. Oh, I did. I did a little...
That is an amazing sound effect. But I can also think of examples of this done wrong. And as Taya knows, I'm about to talk about Fire Emblem.
dear.
Fire Emblem is a great tile-based tactical strategy game where you do combat between enemies on the tiles.
It's a what?
Tile-based tactical strategy game.
Okay.
Yeah, where you have units on tiles that fight other units on tiles, and you move them forward and
Oh
backwards.
my god, sorry, you said tactical. I heard tactile. I was like,
Tactile.
ow. I was like, why did I
Tactile.
tactile?
Tactical.
Fire Emblem is XCOM but fluffy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It actually comes, it comes with a chess set that's like fluffy.
Oh my gosh. But the thing about Fire Emblem is
Yeah.
you have these pitched battles where you have units on tiles that have stats and they attack each other, health goes down.
Yeah.
And quite often in Fire Emblem games, if a unit dies, it's dead. Forever. For the remainder of the game.
Oh.
So
you never
the
get to
game
use it
has like
again.
20 or 30 battles. A character dies in a battle, they're gone. And if that means that at the end of the game you don't have enough players to win, you have to restart the game. And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. This is a problem. Modern games don't have this issue, but you can turn it on in the modern games if you really hate yourself. And Fire Emblem has one of this wonderful system of difficulty called ambushes, where in the middle of a fight, the enemy might get reinforcements. So where should reinforcements spawn? On the enemy side, a little far away from the battle, so it takes them a turn to come into it? No, they spawn behind you and get their turn before you, meaning they insta-kill half of your party, and you then have to restart the level or the game.
You are getting the Riders of Gondor at Helm's Deep. When that happens.
This, some people call these the shock invasions in Fire Emblem, and look,
a good
I've
name.
played through Fire Emblem Fates, and is quite literally one of the top 3 worst games in the series for this specific issue.
Top 3
It's-
worst games for shock ambushes.
It's straight up like it's a common problem in the game series. But I want to say Fire Emblem Fates came out in like 2016.
Yeah.
Like it's recent. It's like the 13th Fire Emblem game, and they still do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
just
at
don't
this
do
At
that.
this point, it's just part of the Fire Emblem. I can't say this.
Fire Emblem.
Thank you. It's just part of their brand.
It is. And look, I love Fire Emblem. It's straight up one of my favorite game series of all time, if not my favorite game series of all time, maybe even above Legend of Zelda. And yep, and straight up, this just you don't want your players to rage quit.
No.
And this is my one complaint about the Fire Emblem series.
Yeah.
One. And it makes me go feral.
Yeah. You know what? I only have one complaint about Zelda broadly, and it's that I want the pretty armor to be more hittable. Like, stronger.
Better. You want
Better.
the armor, you want the
Yeah,
cool
you know-
aesthetic armor to be better.
Better would have been a good word. Can we
Right.
go back and just...
You know, Breath of the Wild is the first game that added armor that you can equip.
Yeah.
How is it? This isn't even a broad
This
complaint. They
isn't
didn't
a broad
have it
com-
until
This is
like,
a hyper
like
specific... No,
six
it's a
years ago.
hyper specific complaint. Yeah.
Just make it pretty, please.
I just want video games generally. I'm going to say it about Zelda, but I think generally video games, I'm going to put on the pretty stuff. And if I get hit a bunch and I die more, I don't really care. Because I want to look nice.
But why not both? I agree.
why
with
not
Why
that.
not both?
Yeah.
But following up from this, are there other mechanical decisions that developers can make to make a hard game fun?
Yeah, I think that flexibility of the player, again, is really important. When you talk about the issue with Fire Emblem, it's like the player doesn't have a way to work around being randomly ambushed from behind, which
Especially when it's like they act before you do. It's like, okay, and
On the
now,
hardest difficulty
and
only,
now
but
I
still.
can't do...
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, and now I can't do anything about it, and I'm going to get smacked.
yeah, you have
Yeah.
no way to prepare for that one, and you have no way to deal with that too, right? And I know I keep going on and on about Dark Souls, but I think it does this really well too, because Dark Souls 1 gives you a really good way to prepare for things, because we've talked about it telegraphs attacks, and 2, it shows you enemies. So you'll see things in the distance, and you're like, that's big and shiny. That looks like it's going to hurt. That's a dragon. It looks
Yeah.
like it's going to hurt, right? So it does that really well because you can prep for a big fight. And then it also gives the player a lot of flexibility for creativity. And I think creativity really is the spark that makes a difficult game good.
Yeah.
Because Dark Souls does things like if you're up in a tower, you can shoot arrows at the big, shiny, scary boss and
Yeah.
not have to fight with it directly. It gives you the flexibility to move around if you can't.
Yeah. You're
take
not
it
you're
head
not
on.
locked into a combat
Exactly.
with
And
it.
then you don't
Yeah.
have to rage quit because you can think about, okay, how can I take a step back from the situation? What
Yeah.
else can I do to maybe cheese it so I can
Is-
get through?
Is there a way that I can bring its difficulty down
Exactly.
before I actually engage in proper combat with it? Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting parallel between a lot of games we play and TTRPGs like D&T with that creativity piece too, because when you're,
we've talked about that a lot.
right,
Actually.
when you're
yeah.
playing D&D, you want to build a scenario for your players where they have the opportunity to solve a problem in different ways.
Yep.
Maybe it's a difficult problem, and
Yeah.
when games do that, it's really cool.
Yeah, some of the best so my I don't know if you know this. My family plays D&D games at Christmas.
Okay,
and
cool.
Whenever
Yeah.
That's
we
a
all do it
holiday
together.
thing.
Such a good holiday thing.
Nice.
And we did a murder mystery arc. But we recently did there's a magical tower. This has just showed up in town because I was like, I need them to leave this town and they don't know where they
Yeah.
want to go. So I'm just they got to go somewhere. My brother likes dungeons. If it's a magic tower, then who cares about what size the rooms are and how big they
Exactly.
are? It just becomes a big puzzle thing. But then you get to be creative about okay, I'm going to set up some stuff in this room and the solution I have in mind. This is where tabletop RPGs can be really good because it's the solution I have in mind is this. But if the players are what if we do this?
Yeah.
Right? Then it's okay, that's actually a better answer than what I have written down here. That's the new solution because I like it more, right?
Yeah,
And
and-
that's something you don't really do in video games.
But I think when games do that, it feels really
Oh, it feels so
good,
good.
right? I
It
think
feels so
This
good
is the
to
beauty of Baldur's Gate. in
yeah,
my
it
opinion.
feels so good
the
to
D&D game.
yeah, it feels so good to guess the answer before you get there.
Or just come up with an alternative answer,
Yeah.
right? When games give you an opportunity that there's no correct answer, especially with a difficult situation, because you're
Yeah.
I don't know how to get through this, but let me think about it and solve it. Then you
Yeah.
don't not only get the reward of beating something difficult, but you get the reward of beating something difficult with a cool
Yeah.
idea you came up with yourself.
I solved a problem.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah, yeah. It's solving puzzles in ways that like open-ended puzzles or something I love, and just open-ended media where it's okay, there isn't one clear solution to this, right? So it's really nice when games give you the ability to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a necessity for designing difficult games. Well, maybe not to like that much of an extent, but giving the player flexible options to get through a challenge really helps with that difficulty, because then you don't get stuck and rage quit.
Yeah. And there are a few other things about designing difficulty mechanically that I think are important to include as well. Just in that, you should make a fun game before you make a difficult game.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a wild piece of advice,
No.
but your game should be fun.
If when you walk into the room where your whole team is meeting and you just write the word hard on the board, you've started from the wrong place. Go
I think
back.
that's what From Software did when they developed Dark Souls.
Yeah,
they were
they just went hard, and then
That's just like Bloodborne.
and then under it
that is Bloodborne.
They just wrote Grimdark, and they just went, all right, moving on.
Grimdark.
But I would add another really good design for a lot of hard games is to make it possible through clever thinking to make the game easier. Not necessarily with an easy mode. Like, I know some people are like, oh, this game has an easy ring, and that makes the game more fun. But something like in Elden Ring, you're doing a hard boss, and you're like, oh, I'm really struggling with this. I am going to call in people online to come help me. And then you get the boss fight. Like, you're going against Milena, whoever one of the final bosses is, and you get this one character named Let Me Solo Her, who is wearing no clothes and a pot on their head, and will solo insta-kill the boss every time.
Yeah.
And, like, that's a way to make a game easier without making an easy game. Make pathways for it. Items that might intrinsically lower difficulty. Things that are like if you wear this, your attacks recharge faster. And
you
suddenly
don't
that's
necessarily have to go toggle the game lower.
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe there's stuff that you really are enjoying at that difficulty level. Like, I'm going to talk about Baldur's Gate again. But, like, if you're in the most, like, easy mode, like, if you're in, I think it's called narrative mode. Yeah, if you're in narrative mode, you can't multi-class. And it's like, well, that's what I was having fun doing, right? It was building all those different skills. Then perhaps, getting some different items, switching up your party, being a little bit more creative in how you handle, like, problems, you're going to have more fun than just switching the skill tree down.
Yeah, and another advantage...
Skill tree isn't what I meant.
Skill level.
Skill level.
But another advantage of this is when players do take this pathway of using items to make the game easier, it doesn't feel like they're saying, I'm bad at this game, I need to put it on easy mode. It feels like, oh, I found this cool item, and this item is so good, I should use this item, because I like how it makes the game, like, more fun, and I feel strategic. It makes the easy mode requires some thinking, so it's a rewarding.
It also externalizes, like, I'm not making it easier. This thing that I found is making it easier, even if it's there because the game devs were like,
because the devs
it's
wanted
really
it to be
hard.
easier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I would also add, and I think this thing that Taya, you might have some notes on as well, is you should make losing fun.
Yeah.
Do you have anything on this you'd like to talk about, Taya?
I guess that's multifaceted again, right? Losing fun in the sense of when you go back to the challenge, it's not insanely difficult. Again, I think Celeste does this really well too, where it goes like room by room by room and it gives you respawns all the time. So when you're losing, it's not like, oh my goodness, I have to go spend another 20 minutes and go through the 12 areas that I was just in and I'm crying, right?
Yeah.
And it gives you, I think, also having a sense of progression again. It's just that making losing fun, right? When you're not constantly dying and dying and dying and dying and you never feel like you're getting any better because you're not learning anything from that
Super Meat Boy.
experience.
Actually, I think Super Meat Boy is a really good example of good difficulty, just because in Super Meat Boy, it follows another good principle of you should let people get back into the action as quick as possible. You shouldn't make them be like you died, like the Elden Ring death. Like, Elden Ring death works in Elden Ring, but a game like Super Meat Boy where you're going to die after 3 seconds, maybe you shouldn't.
It's thematic in any of the Dark Souls games, right? Like, it's very like, oh, you died, and now you have to wait.
Yeah, it is definitely a spite. Like, you get the giant text on the screen that says you died. Like, haha, loser.
Yeah, and then it takes like 30 seconds to reload.
It does, but Dark Souls does do a good job of also giving you respawn points, and sometimes even hidden rooms, like hidden respawn points you can find that are really, and always with bosses, you always have a respawn right before the boss. You can just go through the fog wall, right? It doesn't make that whole punishing system frustrating for the player.
And you know when you go through the fog walls, that's like, okay, there's going to be something behind
Again,
here.
it's that like pointing at a shiny dragon thing, right? Where you're like, okay, I see a fog wall. I feel like I might be getting into something.
They also make it a little bit fun because it's like not every fog wall is a boss. So you always kind of run the gamble of like, is this one going to be?
Yeah, that's true. Keeping the player on their toes, right?
Yeah, is a very good thing.
But I'll also add, Vi, you might remember back to our episode on cooperative play versus competitive play.
You want me to think about other episodes that we've done?
Yes, I always call back to our
You
previous
think
episodes.
that
That's
I
the
have a
point.
memory?
No. Anyways, so from some of our previous episodes, one of the things that can make competitive games very difficult, like hard to make a hard game fun,
Yeah.
in that when you die in a competitive game, you have some other person just shooting you instantly, killing you immediately, and they have to wait to respawn, especially in games where you have one life per round.
Yeah.
When in like a cooperative game, when you die, it's like, okay, let's restart this challenge.
Yeah.
And when you restart this challenge in cooperative games, usually there's a chance for you two to work together and think about what you did wrong and really grow from it. I think back to Portal 2 is a really good example of you lose a challenge and you both kind of groan at each other and argue for a second, and then you're back into trying it. And it feels like you've learned something. And then you have, what's her name, GLaDOS? Yeah, GLaDOS, who just like laughs at you very slightly, gives a little sarcastic quip, and now you're angry at her, so now you want to succeed at the puzzle, and that's a rewarding experience. It rewards learning, and I think that's vitally important. And that kind of allows me to go into the next question now that we've kind of covered this. Taya, beyond just the mechanics, how do we, like, thematically, in terms of like our game design more broadly, design a good game with a very hard difficulty?
I guess it goes back to player flexibility again. I feel like that's one of the weird themes that just flexibility and creativity in there, right? Like giving the player items that they can fight with, because then you're not stuck again.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because we've talked around it, right? Where it's like, how do you thematically do it? Well, you make a situation where the player understands that a game is going to be a certain difficulty, right? If you walk into, like, if you contrast, you know, something with a very dark aesthetic like Dark Souls with like Kirby.
Okay,
you know?
but like
no, like some of the Kirby stuff is like hard, but like,
yeah,
you know, it's a different kind of hard, right? One is a trial and like Kirby's like a trial and error. I'm gonna figure out how to get it right, and Dark Souls is a little bit more like you're gonna get punished until you figure it out.
It's trial and error, just more trial and
It's
error.
more trial and error, right? It hurts a little bit
Yeah.
more. Yeah, like I think just setting players up to understand what they're stepping into is how you do it in a thematic way.
I think for this section in my notes, I have in all caps, make good games first. And this kind of calls back to the same thing previous of your goal is to make a good game, not a hard game, right? Like, of course, a good hard game, a guard game is the goal, but good game should come first, not hard game.
Could you imagine walking into a room? There's like a bunch of people. You've built your Avengers, right? Of game developers.
Oh, no.
You walk in, and on the whiteboard, you put G, A, R, D.
Guard.
It's in
Guard.
the game.
And somebody's like, I think you spelled it wrong. There's a U in there? And you're like, no, we're going to make a good hard game.
A good hard game.
Different starting point. But again, like,
That'd
it's
be
an
a good game
expectation
company
thing.
name. Good Hard Games.
It-
It sounds like
it
Good
would
Old
be.
Games, like the game
Yeah.
the game publisher.
I don't know that I would use it.
I would.
Maybe you're just a
Yeah.
coward.
Yeah.
No.
But as well, I think that there was something that was important in the previous section of you want to support your players that want a hard experience with stuff like speedrun timers or optional quests or harder difficulty modes or achievements, challenges, mod supports, all these extra things you can add in later. After you've made a good game, I need to really stress this, after you've made a good game,
Yeah.
you can add other things that make the
We're
good
not-
game more fun.
We're not relying on the mods to make this game good. We're not
at,
just
at Amplitude Studios.
yeah, we're not just giving it to the community and be like, we actually missed some stuff
Oopsie.
here.
It's the developers
Yeah.
of Endless Legends, Los Angeles Space / Humankind have this issue where every game has intrinsic, really good mod support, and then the game is kind of like meh. And I should say, Endless Legends is one of my favorite strategy games of all time. Endless Space less so, Humankind even less so. But they make good games, just not enough for the mods to be important.
Yeah.
But I'll say it's just as important to support your players who want an easy game, which we kind of already talked about. But I think that's worth saying again. For the players who don't like difficulty, they should be able to play. And for the players who like difficulty even more, they should be able to play.
Yeah. Or again, like just set up this, and we talked about this in D&D all the time. Just set up your expectations well, right? If you in all of your advertising for a game go, you know, this game is easy and look how lighthearted and fun it is, and it's all riding around on horses and walking and doing cool open world stuff, and show no combat, players are gonna be like, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and now I'm upset about it. Just do your expectation setting well, right?
Yeah.
If you're if you're doing a D&D game with your friends, you're like, hey, if you're doing a D&D game with your friends, right? And you're like, okay, I want to try like some of the harder monsters, right? There's all of this stuff that we never really do, you know? Maybe you're somebody who like stats down monsters just because your players don't like combat.
Me.
Hey, here's a game where we're going to do lots of combat. I want you to min-max your characters. I want you to play something really difficult, right? Then no one's going to sit down with a roleplay goofy character. I mean, they might, right? But we're asking for, hey, give me your strongest. Give me your best because I'm going to murder them and bring a backup character.
Sorry, I'm just
Right?
staring at Taya because she played my 2 Christmas games and I made the easy one and then she immediately attacked one of the villagers and got insta-killed and then had to make a new
Oh,
character. And then in
yeah.
the hard one, she made... What was your character in the hard one? It was...
Oh, I think it was an incel, actually.
No, that was the second one. That was the easy one. That was one where that had no combat and then you attacked someone during a snowball fight and got insta-killed by Jack Frost.
Oopsie.
And then in the hard one, you were playing an air elemental made out of wrapping paper.
Oh, yes, the wrapping paper being for Christmas.
Very solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am the person that built Birdo as my very first character in Baldur's Gate.
Didn't your
so-
character
Yeah.
burn to death and then I gave you control of the final boss?
Wrapping paper and fire don't mix well.
Yeah, her
Wh-
character burns
whoa.
to death and I gave her control of the final boss and
Yeah.
then she absolutely wrecked everybody else and nearly
Yeah.
won as the boss, which was very funny.
That's fun. That's a good way to do it. But
I
again,
was
like,
being nice, actually.
You were, but for a little while, just destroyed them, and then you're like, okay,
I'm just thinking
now it's time.
about like other tabletop RPGs that are like horror based, right? Like I know that there is one where it's like, hey, bring 4 or 5 characters to the table because you're gonna die a lot.
Yep.
Right? Like just if you're gonna do something that's gonna be hard, you know it's gonna be difficult, and it's already a good game. I've saw the tape on the wall. You know, we'll
Yeah.
just.
Isn't Call of Cthulhu like that?
I think that's the one I might be thinking of.
I think that might be the one you're thinking of. Call of Cthulhu
Yeah.
is really like that.
Yeah. But like in the instructions, it's like players need 4 or 5, right?
And kind of coming back to this one idea of like, accommodating players who want a bit easier. Taya and I talked about this a little bit of don't call your easy mode baby mode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't do that.
You don't need to insult your players if they want an easier experience. And I think,
Yeah.
honestly, you don't even need, most times, a difficulty slider with easy, medium, hard, normal, extreme,
No.
whatever.
Yeah.
Just give players the normal. Half the time, games will put normal, and then they'll have a little line that says game was optimized for normal play experience.
Yeah.
If you're going to build your game for a specific experience and not build it 4 times over for different
Yeah.
difficulty levels, why not set it for that experience and then give players terrain and
Yeah.
items and respawn areas and let
Yeah.
them shift the difficulty based
Yeah.
on their play experience.
Or like there's stuff like hey, if you just want to play it in this mode, like you should be able to toggle it whenever you want to, right? If you're
Fallout New Vegas did this really well with their
yeah,
difficulty mode.
yeah, like if you should just be at any point you can go into the menu and just change it, right?
Yeah.
This one combat's just a little bit too hard for me. I'm not enjoying it. I'm gonna change it down.
The hard mode in Fallout New Vegas adds weight to your currency. So if you flick it on mid-game, you instantly go over the weight class and have to start throwing away
no.
items. It also adds weight to the ammo for your guns. So it's
Yeah.
just brutal.
Yeah.
And I mean like significant amounts of weight. It's very funny
Yeah.
when that happens, but I would also add, like when talking about this difficulty, just as much as you shouldn't call your easy mode baby mode, I think the term story mode has gotten really popular lately. And I actually really like the term story mode. That's
Yeah.
because that's what it is.
That is what
But-
it is. It's like I don't really care about how hard I have to hit this thing.
Yeah, but also you shouldn't call the hard mode the true mode or the
Yeah.
champions mode or the heroes mode or like
Yeah.
you want to reward players for choosing the hard difficulty, but you don't want other players to look at it and say, "Oh, I wish I was that good."
Yeah,
Right? Or well,
exactly.
maybe you
Well,
want them
may-
to say that, but you don't want them to say you
it's
don't want them to feel
more-
bad for not.
Yeah,
being
it's
able
more
to.
that you don't want to have players beat themselves up. Like, just be cognizant about the words that you're choosing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I,
And I
I
think-
like calling it unreasonable mode.
Yeah, that's fun.
Extreme mode.
Extreme
for
Extreme is
sure.
very
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, give
Yeah.
them a sense of accomplishment when you're doing something difficult, but don't punish people if they want to go through a regular play experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
right.
even
Yeah.
easy mode, even the story mode. Like
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate has a story mode, it's narrative mode,
Yeah.
and it's actually like
It's actually, honestly, it's a little bit better than like the middle mode.
I play the middle mode, and I like it, but
Well,
yeah.
no, but there's stuff where it's like, oh, I walked into this in like slightly the wrong order, and now this bit of combat is unreasonably hard, and I'm not going to get through it. It's like, I'll just change it down.
Yeah,
What
and I
if I was
think
in narrative mode?
What?
What if I was in narrative mode
Be
now?
in narrative mode.
narrating the podcast, like always in narrative mode.
Yeah.
But I
True.
think the way that those modes are implemented is also really important. Like not just shifting up health to an unreasonable amount or shifting up the
Yeah.
enemy attacks to an unreasonable amount. It's a balancing that play experience for the player.
It should
too.
still feel like the same game.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Yeah.
not an extreme back and forth between like, oh, like I've shifted it to easy mode, I can step on all the enemies now with one hit.
Yeah. It's
Or
still like
I can't beat them.
you should still have the same problem solving. Like you should still have to do the same work. You just don't have to do like maybe as much of it.
Yeah,
Right?
I've seen like some RPGs who, when you go into the hard mode, they just give you less XP, meaning you'll level up slower, which means you have to grind to beat a certain challenge. But then after you beat that challenge, like because you've done all that grinding and all that work to get to a good enough level, if you turn down the difficulty, you're now immensely overpowered, right? And if you come from the earlier difficulties where you gain levels really quick, if you change up difficulty, you're immensely overpowered because now you're over leveled. Like either way, it's not fun to go up or down.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the experience of going and playing Pokemon when you're like at the Elite Four and then you go back to Pallet Town and you're like, oh, look, a bird smush.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't like the mental image of smushing a Pidgey.
That's exactly what it
But
feels like
it
when you have a
is,
level
yeah.
80 Pokemon.
Oh, I
You're
don't like
like, I'm
Pidgeotto.
fighting a level 2 Pidgey.
Pidgey puddle?
But like I think for
Mewtwo word.
I
Pokemon,
hate that.
it's valid, but you
Yeah.
don't want that to be your play experience for the entirety of the game.
So sorry,
Yeah.
Right.
if we ever do shirts, Pidgey puddle has to be there because the art of like the Pokemon style Pidgey
It'd just be a
being
fusion
smushed.
between a Pidgey and like a Ditto.
No, I just think he should be smushed.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
that melted
Yeah.
ice cream, but with a Pidgey
Yeah.
shape.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's good.
But also say, like, I know some games that if you go in the harder difficulty, you get better weapons and unique loot and stuff. And I'd actually say that's not a really good decision because at the end of the day, that means now there's a disadvantage to playing in the easy mode. You still want your players to enjoy the easy mode.
Yeah.
Right? The point of picking the hard mode is not to get the cool super weapon, it's to have a fun experience.
It has to be intrinsically valuable to do the harder mode, right? It shouldn't be
Oh, wait.
because you get different stuff.
I
It
just
just needs to
read-
be slightly different.
I just read the next line in my notes and I got angry at myself.
For
because
including this?
Think back to some of the old Mario games on the Wii. If you die 5 times in a row, Luigi or another character pops up and says, "Looks like you're having a hard time. Do you like us to help you out?"
Oh,
and if you say
yeah.
yes, it adds extra platforms.
Yeah.
So offensive.
That is the most infuriating pop-up ever.
Yeah.
You die like a few times and it's like, it looks like you're having some difficulty. Want us to make it easier for you? Like, I am going to actually scream.
Yeah. It's the Clippy of like, do you want it? Do you want
Oh, no.
Oh my God,
Luigi's
why?
like, do you want help?
Do you want help? You want the game to be easier?
It seems like you're trying to play this game and you're bad at it. Would you like some help?
the ultimate difficult game really is formatting in Microsoft Word.
Imagine playing like Elden Ring or Dark Souls and then you die on like a boss 3 times and someone pops up like, "Would you like some extra summons?" Like, oh my God, I'm going to kill you.
The "you died" text basically does that in effect anyway.
I know,
mean,
but
when-
like imagine them being like, "Would you like us to kill the boss for you?"
Yeah, like very frustrating. That is baby mode. It's like, and now I
Yeah.
have a babysitter. Thanks.
Yeah.
No, that's just the Guardian
Yeah.
in Baldur's Gate. Not actually, not
Not
actually,
actually,
but
but I understand
but
where you're going with
narratively.
this. Yeah. I mean, I'm now picturing my Guardian as Clippy, and I really don't enjoy that.
You're welcome. But
Sorry, I just learned something recently, and obviously might be apocryphal, something I saw on the internet. Apparently, the Guardian in like a beta used to be called like your ideal lover.
Oh no.
Like so when it flipped from character creation to the Guardian, it was your ideal lover, and then you had to make just an explicitly hot person. Or like whatever
so
you think is hot.
funny.
And I just think that's beautiful. Because I did that. I was just like, oh yeah, I'll just make a hot person. Thank you very much. Like
I made my character as a grandmother.
that's fun. I
Oh,
really
no.
enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, I did that for all my characters.
That's
but anyways,
really you did that as your Guardian as your grandma now?
not my real life grandmother.
the
as-
character's
like, the
grandma.
character's
I assume,
grandmother.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're gonna have such an interesting time.
I know. I'm
Okay.
aware.
Okay.
But anyways, that comes to about the end of the episode. We're
Not
right
a
at
good
time.
call.
No,
Do-
I made Yoshi and Birdo. Are you saying I have to take down Yoshi at the end of this game?
I don't know. Don't spoil.
I'm not
We're
saying
at the end
anything.
of the episode. Do
just-
either of you have anything left before we conclude?
I want Clippy in a video game as a boss that I can murder.
That would be amazing.
Yeah,
I would
that'd
like
be very
that
good.
a lot.
I think it would be really
I'm
therapeutic.
just imagining like the chanting choral like music, just like do 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 do.
Also, I want to complain about formatting in Microsoft Word online and how horrible and frustrating it is, and that's all I have to say.
Yeah, again, it leaves no flexibility
Nope.
or creativity for the user in their experience. So it's not a good, difficult game.
not
Says
a
the
good
girl currently
difficult.
learning LaTeX.
Not a guard game. Just
Not
saying.
a card game.
It's not a game.
It could be. You're not using Microsoft Word
I
right.
saw someone who programmed a game in Microsoft Excel.
Yeah, you're not using the Microsoft Office suites properly.
Okay,
They're
you said
all
word, not
games.
sweet. Okay. Anyways,
If it doesn't feel like Dark Souls, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
so I think
Microsoft,
that gives...
the Dark Souls of word processors.
Okay. I think that gives us an over idea of how to design difficulty in a game well. We have some more episodes coming up on the idea of how do we design games with open worlds that we'll be recording, fun fact, right after this, and you can hear next week. So I want to thank you all for listening to this episode. I hope to see you all next time for the episode on openness. Thank you both so much for coming in for today's
Thanks,
episode.
Tam.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
And that's it for today's episode. But what if you wanted to listen to more? Well, our new episodes come out every Thursday at 9 p.m. Atlantic, and there are 3 different ways that you can listen. If you're in the Fredericton area of New Brunswick, Canada, you can listen live on CHSR 97.9 FM through any of your radio services. If you're not in this region or you prefer using the internet, you can tune in on chsrfm.ca at the same time, 9 p.m. Atlantic. As well, we release all of our episodes on a number of podcasting platforms online, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. So if you wanted to, you could go back right now and listen to Season 1, where Vi and I do a deep dive into the fundamental concepts of game design, rather than the hardware they'll be taking up this season. Anyways, thank you for listening, and have a good one.